Well, I say let's get started. I'm going to just preface by saying I get loud and I talk really fast. So if that's too fast for someone and someone has a question, please jump in at any time. But today what I want to talk about is content strategy for the working class. But before we jump into why I care about that, let's talk about who I am. Okay, that's not me. That's Christina Halverson. I don't know if anyone knows who that is, but she's pretty awesome content strategist out of Minneapolis. She wrote this nifty book called Content Strategy for the Web. If you are interested in content strategy, I highly recommend it. But essentially, she's like paid lots of money to be a content strategist, has conferences all over the world, pretty awesome. But that's not me. But I am, well, I'm closer to this. This is also not me, though. Sadly, this is Karen McGrain. She is a UX expert, also travels everywhere, does great, amazing things, and wrote the book Content Strategy for Mobile. Well, what's my point really here? Well, that's me. No, it really is. I can prove it. In 1986, I was in, if you can see this, I was in the Happy Hustlers 4-H group, and I sewed that. Really?
Yes.
You're from Minnesota?
No.
Oh.
I'm our leader.
Great. So I sewed that. I didn't really win anything but like participation award. But in 1987, backup champion right there. My first bubble dress and my last. Love there. And by the way, my parents' living room is exactly the same. The mouse, everything's the same. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not a content strategist. That is not what I do all day long. Instead, I'm one of you. I'm part of an agency team, or I'm with the client. What I'm trying to do is figure out the best solution. We need content strategy, but we don't have the money and the time to do it. So how do we incorporate it and make it realistic? So I actually work at a company called August Dash. I just started there about 3 weeks ago. We're an agency that does Drupal and Magento and WordPress. Before that, I worked at a company called Gorton Studios, and I got to work with a couple different clients trying to figure out what to do with their content, how to get rid of content, how to manage content, and how to come up with the plan. So I've been doing stuff, but I'm not like one of these people that get to do it all the time. So I feel like what I'm bringing to the table is I know what it's like to try to fit into the budget, because I'm also a project manager at heart. So you got to be realistic about it. But content strategy has a lot of feelings that it brings to people. It's very difficult. It's time consuming. It's typically one of the most complicated timeline of the entire project. It's often a mystery. What does that even mean? What are you doing when you're doing content strategy? It's expensive. I hate trying to be able to add something like that to my project budgets. And sometimes it can often feel really impossible. Like, how do you even get started? How do you get to the finish line? But it really is important. And in 2015, it's probably, we're not doing anyone a service if we're not implementing different types of techniques to take care of our content in a good manner when we're building a website. Christina has a great quote that truly your content is the biggest advantage you're going to have online. You can build this great functionality, this really pretty site, but if you put crap in, you're going to get crap out. So we need to take time to figure this out. So my goal right now in life, my only goal in life, is to make sure that this is realistic for everybody. So there's 4 questions that I think we need to answer to be able to do that. And they are, who is actually doing this work? What is the work? What are we even supposed to be doing? How do we do it well? And how do we keep it that way so that we don't hit a launch and it kind of goes out the door after that? And just so you guys know, I will put, the slides are actually up in SlideShare already and everything too. So whatever you see up here will be up for grabs. So let's first talk about our content team. And what we're looking, as you can see, is for bright, welcoming contributors. These people look great. So what does that mean? So I'm looking for somebody that's available. People think they can do this, they want to be involved, but are they really available? They need to be available every single week to be on a team to have a meeting. And then they need to write stuff, they need to review stuff, there's a bunch of stuff. So if somebody's already maxed out 40, 50, 60 hours a week and they can't adjust their schedule, can't be on the team. They need to be a learner. I'm guessing when you do a new website, a lot of people, maybe folks in this room, especially if you're an agency, you've gone through this process a lot, but if you haven't, you're a client and you maybe built this your first website, maybe your second website. It's not something you do every single day. So these people on your team need to be excited about it and go out and learn about what are the new techniques, what are the new things I need to know about. You gotta be talented. Make sure someone on your team can actually write for the web, can actually edit. You also have to be a big thinker for the organization. So if you're coming from a university department, maybe the theater department, you can't just have that perspective on. You need to be thinking about what's the most important thing for the company and the organization from the top. You have to be able to move through the politics. There's one of the biggest problems that I find when people end up with a website with so much crap on it is that, oh, this person said it had to be there, this person said it's super important. You have to be able to wade through that and be like, I'm sorry, but that's not our objective, that's our mission, that's not what we're telling our users about right now. I know your stuff's really important, but I'm sorry. So somebody has to have the authority and the ability to do that. Also, you need to make sure some people stick around. So when you build this content team, you're going to need more people probably than you're going to need long term. After launch, it's a different team, but you want to make sure you have at least half of those folks that started this to continue on. So make sure you're picking people that will continue to be part of that content team. So the roles that I think are really important is the taskmaster. So this is kind of like your project manager, someone that's really good at tracking details, will have the spreadsheets, will have the deadlines, will push people on it, and just kind of keep bugging people every single week. You're going to need a real web copywriter, and I think at this point in the start of the project, it's a great time to talk about who the right person is for writing. I think usually when you get to the table, the clients that I work with, bless their heart, say, oh, this person writes for the web. Just because they have been writing for the web doesn't mean they should be writing for the web. It's just a talent. I don't have it, but it's a really important talent. And that might be actually a place that you have to step outside and hire someone to do some templates or some part of the stuff. But see who has the aptitude to be able to write for the web really well. You're going to need editors, so all the proofreading and the approval process. There'll be a couple different people doing that. You're also going to want some subject matter experts, and depending on how big the organization is, you might have multiple, but essentially if you're writing pages about moose, you're going to need to have someone that knows about moose in case the writer isn't aware of that. So someone that's going to be able to make sure it's factual and accurate. And I don't know why I just picked moose. Someone that's in charge of marketing, right? There's a marketing communication person that is going to be involved at some point, and they need to be included in these conversations. They might not be at the ground level, picking the content, writing the content, reviewing it, but they need to be involved so that they agree to the brand, the tone, the messaging that you're putting outward. And then also your brand ambassador. So this might come in the form of like a graphic designer. This might be the writer person, because some of these roles might overlap, but you need someone to make sure that you're holding up to some sort of standard that, you know what, that doesn't pass mustard, that doesn't look good enough, that doesn't read well enough. Someone that's going to be kind of checking that. So this is the team you're going to put together right at the start of the kickoff of a new project. So I'm going to talk about all of these as in a brand new website, but of course this can be pulled into when you go back to sites and address them. So this is what you're going to do. Just like the people that are on the kickoff and the web stakeholder team, they're going to include some of these people, but grab this team at the same exact time. Then, if you can before your kickoff meeting, start to get into a content inventory and the audit of it. And has anyone done content audits before? Awesome. Kind of a pain, right? But super, super important. So I would say besides the writing, this is going to take the most amount of your time. And I would not skip this. So a content audit, what you want to do is start with essentially one person needs to be able to put their entire hands around what's on your website. They need to know all the things on your existing website. So you're going to pull up a Google spreadsheet, and you can do it in different, I'll show you some other tools, but a Google spreadsheet's great because it's free and you can share with a lot of different people, but you're going to put a whole bunch of things on it. So you're going to start with the title of the page. You're going to add what content type is it. If you're like working in Drupal, that makes a lot of sense to add. People know if it's a bio or a page or a news item. You're going to add in the URL that currently is at, so people can reference it as they're writing. As you go further in process, you can also add the new URL that will help your team do redirects in the future. You want to add a point person. Who's going to own this content? Who's responsible for it? You can't do it right away. That will be filled in over time. You should look at your stats. This is a great time to pull in some quick and dirty stats. And there's a lot of stats you can pull in, but at minimum, I would take a look at your site in an average month. So if you have ups and downs, maybe you want to do a Christmas and a spring or something if it's very different. But put in the average hits it gets per month. That's going to help you later on determine the value of your content. Also, when was it last updated? Was it last week? Was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? Get that into a column. So right now we're just putting everything in there. We're not making any evaluation. We're just getting everything in there in a straight list. Once you get that, you'll know everything you have. So when you go to the kickoff meeting and you start talking about what do people need to do on your site, what our audience is, what are going for, what the new site features are going to have, you're going to start having in your mind what you actually have now. Doesn't mean what you're going to have in the future, but you're going to have that in your head.
Can you generate this automatically?
Yes, and I'll show you, I'll put up a tool in a second. So there's different ways you can, like I dump things out of Drupal all the time, but there's actually a cool tool that'll pull both together. I've never used it, but a lot of people swear by it. So you'll get it all in the spreadsheet. And then you're going to essentially determine the value of it, and I'll walk through in a little bit how you can do that. As you determine the value, you're going to start purging. So if you do any new site, I would love to see half the content gone. People do not spend time on websites. They want their answers super quickly. You need to let it go. Now, if your site was built a year ago, that's probably a different story than 4 years ago. But do not hold on to things. Let things go and let it free. So when you get into the sitemap portion, right? So when you start figuring out your navigation as you're going through the discovery phase, now you're going to take that list and you're going to put it into the structure of the new sitemap. You're going to see how those pieces go in, and you're going to find the big gaps. What are the new things that you started talking about, you're excited about, you're going to have on your site? There's no content written about it now. Okay, we need a page for that. So that's going to fill out from there. And then you're going to assign owners. But the big step in this is, if you do two things, I would get a handle on everything that you have, because this is essentially your checklist to say, you know, who's doing it, who's got it covered, what needs to be moved over. The other thing is evaluating value, and that's where you can start purging and get rid of things. So these are the things that I like to think about when I'm evaluating if content has any value. Usefulness. Is your user coming to find this on your website? Or should you be the expert or the carrier of this information? And if it's not your user, it better be really, really important to your organization to be putting this information out. Because sometimes it's a little bit of a marketing piece. Is it fresh? Has it been updated recently? If it's not a blog, if it's not a news item, if there's nothing about it that's historical, be really tough about it if it hasn't been updated within a year. Is it accurate? If you're writing some sort of either scientific information or you're making a statement, you want to make sure that it is accurate, and then you have the time to keep it up to date and accurate. Otherwise, you're losing people's trust in what they're coming to the site for. The quality is there. Is that going to meet your brand? Is it good enough? Is it showcasing your brand in a certain way? If you can't keep these pages up to date so they represent you properly, let them go. It's no big deal. You can always add them later when you got time. The traffic. So that's all those stats, right? So look through those pages. If you're averaging, like your top 20 pages are at 1,000 hits and your bottom, 30 are at nothing, why are they around? Now, they might not be getting any hits because nobody's finding them, right? Your navigation could be a mess. They could be tucked under something else. So take that with a grain of salt. But if nobody really cares about them, it's not a high priority, all these kind of things start adding up, it's a good reason to get rid of it as well. Ownership. If you cannot assign an owner to every single piece of content, you will have to get rid of it because nobody will update it. Somebody has to own every single piece of content and be excited about it. And that is a great way to get rid of stuff. If somebody doesn't care that much, then it's not that important. And then also, kind of on the bottom of the list, essentially, is, how is this going to be on a mobile device? I see a lot of pages that have charts and diagrams and things that just utterly fail in mobile. And with mobile usage going to half, 50% and higher, it's just not worth it anymore to see this kind of stuff and have your brand represented that way. So if you can't clean it up and it looks terrible on mobile devices, I'd also let that go. And so if some of these pages you can look through and just instinctually like, well, that's nobody cares, or that has low, and it's really easy to do. Sometimes it's harder, especially if you have a larger committee kind of looking through this. And a good way to do that is with a scorecard. So you can pick whatever scale you want, but I like, 1 to 5, and you can add that into the spreadsheet right next to each. Add 5 different columns, or, well, how many ever columns these are, and have people go through. You rated, how useful is it? It's a 4. Okay, well, traffic, it's a 0. Add that up, and when you figure out what your threshold, if we need to be 7 times 35 points is the top, decide before you start. If it's not a 20, it's gone, no matter what. And if you can't make it a 20, or whatever the number you guys decide it is, then it's gone. Does that make sense? Anybody have questions on this so far? Cool. So essentially, you're going to go through and you just keep using this document, and what you can do is you're going to assign the people and the deadline. So first draft due, second draft due. Did it get moved over to Drupal? All the different steps along the way. It's a great document to use. I have several clients using the ones I've already created. It's massive, but it's worth using. Now, if you don't want to use Google, there's a couple different tools that are really good. So I've used Gather Content. Has anyone used Gather Content before? It's a great tool. Costs like $80 to $100 a month, so no big deal, right? If you're writing your content for 3 months, we're talking about $300. But what it does for you is it doesn't automatically generate it, but as much as you can take and you put in your different architecture in here, and it can live underneath it, so you can see the whole structure. You break each page into the fields, so title, teaser, whatever the components are, and then you go back and forth with your coworkers, and they can add notes in the middle, change this, do this, do all your annotating in there, make your content file in here, and then use the handy-dandy API to move it over to Drupal. Now, it's not perfect, because when you get images involved and all those kind of things, but it's a great tool to, if you guys don't want to be writing in Word or in Google because you have too many people that have to add feedback and approvals, this will do all that approval system for you. And that's the same as Divi HQ. Now, to generate that automatic list for this content inventory, CAT, the content analysis tool, automatically pull it in. I've never done this. I've seen it at, content strategy conferences. I've heard people talk about it. They say it's amazing, but I haven't done it. So definitely something you can test. It's also about, $80 to $100 a month. And it also will pull in your analytics too. So I'm not sure how it displays it, but it will do that work, because pulling in the analytics can be a pain if you don't have a programmer that can pull it in for you and you're hand typing the top 50 items or writing to the spreadsheet yourself. So I highly suggest trying it, and if anyone has a reason to do that soon, just tweet me out and just let me know what you guys think of it. All right, so we've got that, and this process is going to go, you should start this before the kickoff meeting, revise it after you're done with your sitemap wireframes, and then you're going to keep using it all the way through to get your deadlines and checklists all the way to the end. But let's get into making sure your content is really good. So we talked about the team and who's going to do the work. We talked about how we figure out what the scope is with the inventory. Now we've got to make sure that our content's actually good. And there's 2 things I want to talk about for that. And again, there's 100 things you can do, but I'm trying to boil it down to, I think, the most effective, quickest things to do. So page tables. Page tables is a document that you create that essentially prioritizes what you're trying to do, the audiences, and the messaging on a page. So there's no template. Has anyone seen like a third-party tool or anything for this? Basically, you pull up your Word doc or your Google Doc and you start writing this out. And so I would suggest, you could do this for every single page, but I suggest at minimum do it for your primary nav and your secondary nav. And you're going to just type up each page and put these elements on it. And so what this is doing essentially is, instead of just opening a blank document and writing your page, you're creating yourself an outline. What do I need to talk about? What are the fields I need to fill out? So you're going to start with the title of the page. You're going to make sure your objectives are clear, who you're writing for, the audiences that you will identify in the beginning of your redesign process, and then your messaging. What do you need them to know about this page to get your message through, and then your call to action. Is it okay if they stay on this page? Do you want them to go donate money? Do you want them to go learn more about this program? What's the next step? You're going to also want to include your content elements. And so I don't know how familiar everyone is with Drupal, but I'm talking about like the fields. What are the pieces that are going to be available to fill out for each type of content? You don't have to fill them all out, but now we know, okay, I got to come up with the title. maybe a teaser, maybe a body text, maybe a link, maybe an image, all those pieces up in there. You also want to be noting the assets you need. So what I'm talking about is video and images. All those pieces you want to add, because at this phase, you're probably not going to pull all your images, but note where they are, what you're going to try to accomplish. And now's a great time to make a note about maintenance. How often should this page be updated? Who should be updating it? Should it be quarterly? Should it be once a year? What's the maintenance plan? Any notes you can take early on will help you at the end of the process. The other element to make sure that you're writing well and consistent is creating an editorial guideline. And I've seen a lot of different examples of them, and they range from being super detailed to 20 pages to being about design, to being about writing, about your style. Essentially, what you need to do is create a playbook for the writing and visual for your website. However you do that, kind of don't care as long as you have something, at least 3 to 5 pages. And I think there's 2 things you really need to make sure you're addressing in that playbook. The first is design. You need to have rules about how the logo can be used. You need to have rules about what the colors are and how they can be used. What fonts should be used. Should a certain font be used for headings, a certain font for body text? Is there something in the block on the side or a promo title or all those kind of things? It should also include things about what the feeling is and what you're trying to communicate visually. Also headings in Drupal. There's heading 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how far you go down. When is it appropriate to use a heading 1? When is it appropriate to use a heading 2? And then rules about photography and video. Let's not do photo montage, everybody, but writing this down because you're going to have a bunch of people writing content. So the playbook is really there because you have more than one person writing your content and representing your brand. You have lots of people across an organization that are going to put things in, whether they put the final review or the first draft in. We want them to be following something standard so that your brand is consistent across the way. The other one is writing. Really need to be noting about who you're writing to and what the tone should be. What is your voice and tone, like your personality online? Style and usage is really about abbreviations, capitalizations, grammar. How you want to be casual, do you want to be formal? Metadata and tags, these are things that often get forgotten but really important for search engines. Getting the right information in the back end. And then best practices is really this big, terrible grouping I made there to cover things like how to write well for the web. And the nice thing is, if you don't know how, there are a lot of books and a lot of articles out on the web for this, which is great for someone to me. Like if I were to go, start figuring out, I can see this. So this is talking about, how can you scan content? How do you use meaningful headers? How long should your teaser text be? You should be writing in an active voice and make it human and not like, really formal and uncomfortable. Just things, and these things change. Like that's the thing. Part of the maintenance for this is to update this every single year because the people that write with an organization can change and what you're trying to communicate on your brand and in the web in general can change. So those are the 2 things. If you had to do anything to write well, I would do those things. I highly suggest if you have the opportunity to hire someone to either guide or provide a seminar or even template something. So that sounds terrible, but essentially I'm saying if you had 1,000 products to write, maybe they can come in and help you with the first couple products that are really important so you can get a sense of how they would recommend breaking it out into headers and sections and things like that. I think it's really valuable because hiring a web writer can be really expensive. If you can do it, super, but there's a way to kind of mix together in that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is content testing. So this is actually, I should say, the third thing to make sure your content is really good. And I don't know, did everyone go to the keynote this morning? Super. So I think her point, and I totally believe it, is that you can do very minimal to get a lot out of it. And I think that comes with the content testing as well. You don't need to do much, but you'll be shocked how it will make an impact. I was actually down in Missouri in January. We had a first iteration of build of a site, and it's a site for hunting and fishing and trapping in Missouri, where they show you how to hunt, kill, and eat and every single kind of animal basically in that state, which is amazing. They also talk about preserving stuff, but we hadn't got there at that point. So we had people come in, and we wanted to make sure that there's a section that they had a lot of rule there rules about the hunting and fishing, and you can't mess it up. Like, you know, there's like, well, on Sunday you can stand sideways, wear your hat left, and shoot this way, but you can't shoot to the right until Monday, and then it was just all this, that, and plus jargon that came out of the state that had to be communicated, and we're like, well, we don't want to screw this up, right? So we were essentially testing the functionality, so we thought when we got down there. We tested with like 7 people, which by the way, you don't need 7. You can do it with 3. We just had extra in case people didn't show up. Apparently they're very enthusiastic about hunting down there. And we walked through different scenarios, asked them questions, went through the testing, and what I was most surprised about is half of the feedback, if not more, was only about the content. It was not about the functionality. It wasn't about not being able to find something. It wasn't about the tabs. It was literally about the text. We had questions like, if you're 21 years old, can you go hunt a deer with this kind of permit? And I would literally watch people hover on the answer, and they couldn't read it. They read it backwards, they couldn't find it, they couldn't understand the text. Is that because we had too much on the page? Is it because we didn't use our headers well? It was all about the text, which really surprised me, because I was kind of in the past like, okay, content testing is a little bit of a luxury. We don't got time for it. I was absolutely wrong. We learned so much and changed so much because our developers was worried we'd come back with all this work for them to do, and turned out we had just a lot of writing to change on the page, which was good for them. The first thing, though, to make it really easy and kind of go with this working class theory of you don't have much time and money, is do kind of readability tests. Has anyone run a readability test before? Super. So what it is you can go online to those places and take your page, copy and paste it in, hit a button, and it'll give you a score. And so what we're trying to find out are different things. And essentially a readability test is trying to tell you how complex your words are. And it's giving you a grade. So on here, we've got a grade level of 9.5. It turns out that, what's the stat? I have to go backwards, sorry. 21% of US adults read below a 5th grade level. And 14 or 32 million can't read at all. So that brings us up to 35% of our audience is a 5th grade level or beyond. And that's what the Department of Education for the United States did in 2013. It's a little older, but essentially what it's telling me, unless this is really complicated stuff, this is too high. So what you want to do when you have your audiences at the beginning, you're going to kind of figure it out. So say somebody wants to go to the University of Northern Iowa. We probably don't need to be at a 5th grade level. Or the audiences are families and kids that are looking to go into college or are here already. So you can go at a higher level for that, even though some parents might not be at that. But, you know, if you were trying to talk about, you know, social service and trying to get, you know, food stamps and things within a government, you need to take your audience into account for that. So this is something that takes seconds. So everyone should do that. The problem is with this is that it's not testing comprehension. So I can put 5 words together that make perfect sense, and it's going to score the score. I can mix them all up. It will score the exact same score. Computers can't test comprehension, and that's where user testing comes in. And what we want to do is essentially find out if they can find the content on a page, if they can read the content and comprehend it, and can they act on the content. So grab 1 to 3 people in the room. Christine said 1, but I'm going to push for 3. Make up scenarios. So you're going to have them, if you were this kind of person and you need to do this task, and watch them. It's literally that simple. She is absolutely right. And these are the things you're going to try to find out. If you want a tool to do this, say you can't do it or you have a really hyper-specific audience, openhallway.com and usertesting.com will find the users for you. You pay a fee, you put your questions and website up there, and they'll do the test for you and give you results back. There's a ton of other ones too if you want other options, but those are some of the more popular ones. Camtasia, which is the last one, that's a screen recording. So when we went down to Missouri and we've done other testing sites, we download that on our computer and then record it so anyone that's not there can see the video of what people are doing. So record the voice and then the screen that you're doing stuff. So that's, I want to say that's about $100 a month to something like that, but it's also free for a month for trial. So if you want to just test it out, you want to have only one test, you can do that as well. All right, any questions on user testing? Everybody's so quiet. All right, governance. So this is the last component. We got the people, we know what our scope is, we know how to write well, we're all amazing now, we're gonna hire someone to do it. Now is the governance plan. And a governance plan is basically the process of managing that content, the people involved, their responsibility to take care of it, the workflow, documentation, and training, blah, 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 blah. It's really long. Essentially, the goal is you have a plan in place to keep your content doing well. And this is all about trying to make sure that you don't go off course. So this isn't a plan to get you better SEO. This isn't a plan to have any sort of KPI track necessarily. This is the plan for the person that walks in your office and says, I need this on the website now, and you say, no, because our plan right here says that this is what we're focusing on right now, and it's not in line. And it's to make sure that people are doing stuff on a regular basis.
You recommend that that's written out, or are you gonna get to that point?
What?
Are you recommending that we have something like that written out, kind of like that playbook that we were talking about?
Yes. So, we'll talk about right now. So, what I recommend is as you're going through this process, once we talk about this, you'll know this when you start at the beginning, you can do this as you go along so that you don't sit at the end and write this. I just wrote a 20-page governance plan like 3 weeks ago. It sucked. What if I would have done it from the beginning? It would have been a great idea. So there's a certain amount of stuff you can do in the beginning, and then you're going to revise it as you go along, because what you do after a site launch is not the same as what you do during the site launches. So we're going to run through the pieces that I think are important, and then we can ask questions too if there's more after that. So the roles are accountability. So the roles are what we already have, right? We already have a content team that we made at the top. These are the people who are going to do the work long term now. So who is that? How has that changed? You need to make sure you assign accountability and responsibility. There's a nifty-difty chart, which I don't have up here, sorry, that kind of outlines roles and the responsibility and who reports to who. Map something out. It doesn't have to look like a perfect chart, but like your job as the web writer is to do this, this, and this. Your job as the editor is to review this, this, and this. What is your responsibility? If you don't make it very clear in some silly document, people just don't know what their accountability is. So make it clear on a piece of paper. It just needs to be one page. The content creation workflow. So as you've been writing the content, you've had a plan, right? It started with this person, it went to this person to review, maybe it stopped over at a subject matter expert because you need some input, then it went to the brand person. Whatever that flow is, it's probably going to be different now that the site's launching. Maybe doesn't need to get that bogged down because we're not starting from scratch. So what's the flow now? Make sure Mary knows to give it to Bob, to give it to Chad, and all these things, so it's not unclear about what happens. Just make sure that's written down in a diagram as well. Here to here to here to here. And the editorial calendar, so this is something that you should have both for your website, for your social media, anything that you're outputting content. And there was a great session before that talked about newsletters and blogs, anything around that, it should all be interconnected as appropriate, right? Maybe your organization isn't appropriate on Twitter. Whatever makes sense for your content and channels, this should go on some master editorial calendar. It's going to say who's doing it. First, in the entire year, you want to outline what you're doing. You know, what are your key points? What are you going to touch? Revise it every quarter, if not sooner, because things change throughout the year in your mission and goals. You want to assign about when something could be posted. Is it going to be on Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesday? What time of day? How does it get posted? Does it go out to multiple sources? Does it go to only one source and then you're going to promote it on a social channel? This should all be part of your editorial calendar so that you make sure you send something out on a regular basis. And the conversations you have while you're building the website to make sure what you're going to commit to will help you fill this out. Because anything you can't own shouldn't be on this list. Content maintenance. Great, you're talking about all the stuff you're going to make new on your editorial calendar. You need to also have a plan for how you're going to maintain the current content, or you're going to be in the exact same spot we started in when we made the website. You need to update content regularly. So what I would suggest doing is take your list of content types that you're now going to have from your Drupal site and note how often should it be updated. You know, how often should you, don't forget about taxonomy and all the little pieces in between, but how often should you be updating, you know, pages? How often should you be updating your blog template? How often should you be updating, I can't think of anything, a newsletter? Figure it out. Everything should be updated at minimum of a year unless it's something like a blog that people expect to have life and you're never going to touch again. Year is really long though. Think about if it should be quarterly. You should also think like, okay, say you perfectly launch your website on January 1st. Don't say everything will be updated in December. You'll never get to it all. Break them out. Every quarter do something different so that you're not overwhelmed by everything. Alrighty. And then editorial guidelines. So good news, we already have something, right? Revise it a little bit as needed. Just make sure it's all in place. And then what you want to do is update this every single year, as well as provide training on it. So make sure that your brand hasn't changed, your audience hasn't changed, anything hasn't shifted major. Also, how is writing in the web different? You know, right now it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. People are writing without teasers. Sometimes you don't display dates. Maybe that shifts in a year. Take a look at what the newest things are in the web and see if that should be incorporated into your guide. Training. There'll be a couple different types of training. In general, you'll need people that have Drupal training. Anyone that's new or a refresher about how to use Drupal in smart ways. But you also need training on how to uphold your brand and content. That should be done every single year. And a great way to do it is not just like walk through your guideline as much as bring up some examples of things that maybe could be done better and have the team kind of work through it together. Sit down and be like, okay, let's think about how we should improve this. What would you do here? What would you do here? So people have some examples to think through. Because everyone just needs to be on the same page to make sure it's consistent. And then you do want to be measuring progress because you're not sure, you know, this is all great stuff, but someone in the upper office or yourself might want to know, like, are we making an impact? Is this any different? And I would really do that by figuring out what your goals are first. So you have these high-level organizational goals, and then break down those goals into some objectives for content. So if you want to get more people to donate, that's one of your organizational objectives. Some content goals could be create a donate page, create a video that talks about how important it is to donate, show your donors, different things like that. Now you're going to track how those things perform in Google Analytics. So that's one way to provide a little feedback and value to doing all this hard content work and see what happens with them. All right, so we've come to the end. Am I way under time?
Yes.
Yes. But it's short because we don't need to do very much. So essentially, you know, just to recap, who are you working with? What is the scope? How are you going to make sure it's written well? And then maintain, maintain, maintain. So it's not too much stuff. And those are really the things that we're going to walk through that I think are important. Now, there's a bunch of other things you can do, like gap analysis and more user personas that help you figure out your audience more, or a competitor analysis. There's all this great stuff. And again, I totally believe in it and think it's wonderful. I just think if we do some minimal stuff and get it into our projects, we'll actually do it. It can't be too daunting or too big or too overwhelming. So, why not? You get more done that way. It's more fun. All right, and I just want to say, these are actually American golfers in the 60s doing the hokey pokey. And if anyone can figure out how that's doing the hokey pokey, I don't know. I'm going it's the 60s, right? All right, any questions?
So we do content projects we're an agency, so we do them for practically every website project that we do. Is all those different guidelines you gave out for like the editorial guidelines and the governance plan, is all that stuff something that you would do for every single content project?
So it's interesting. So I just left a company that built websites from $100,000 to $500,000. And now I'm in an agency that builds websites from $20,000 to $60,000. Some are more, but that's kind of the sweet spot. So now it's my job to figure out, and I've been there 3 weeks, to figure out how to incorporate this into that. So what I would say is, I would love to say that, but I bet like the governance guideline, I would probably write up a one-page document to give to the client and say, please go do that. Because I think they need that. I think all these things are really important. So what I would do, if, you know, for a project coming up next week, I'm meeting with people, I would put together, as an agency, I would put together the, first I'd make sure they have a content team and figure that out, but I would literally, I'm gonna put together an inventory list of all the things before we meet with them, and then we're gonna move it into the sitemap structure, and then we're gonna tell them what a page table is and have them write their own after one or two examples, and And we're also going to try to write a couple pages, because we actually have writers on staff. And they're going to write a couple pages to give them a start of what it means. And I'm also going to eventually develop a good writing for the web behavior guideline. So I think a lot of this, when it's smaller, giving some tools to help people learn and go off that and maybe have some check-in points.
So
But
you
I-
have them, sorry to interrupt you.
Nope,
So
go
you have them write their own content usually, like with some guidance?
Yeah,
Okay. We
It's just-
actually do a lot of straight full writing.
writing,
projects.
that's awesome. Like I
So-
just,
How do you
even,
get them to do it
That
themselves?
is my other question.
you know what, I honestly, think the biggest thing is that people don't know where to start and people don't have a timeline.
Okay.
If you can give them a sense, like with that inventory, people are like, oh, then they can do it. Then they can pace themselves out. And then always say, everything doesn't have to be live when you launch. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Like, and then the things that aren't important probably never get written. Like, you can go write it after the site launches. It's just a point, and then go write it after that. I think that's just everyone's just like, I don't know where to start. And so every time I've gotten an inventory together and started showing page tables, like, it's just like a light bulb.
Okay.
So,
Were you gonna show us the inventory tool?
the cat one?
Something that, I thought you said that it was 2 programs that you use together.
The one that pulls analytics in with,
You're using a Google spreadsheet.
oh, that I've done before, you mean?
Yeah, I thought you were gonna show us that.
I can.
Did I dream it?
That's okay. I can pull up, sorry. This is the courtesy of Gordon Studios. I do actually, I'm a contractor now, because I'm finishing out this awesome project for the Science Museum Minnesota up there. So this is a document, all the tabs aren't populating yet, and that's not really gonna help you. Why did that happen? Okay. Okay, so this is something that I made for, oh look, he's editing it right now. That's Eric. He's up in the corner. So this is what I made for them. We started with, they had about 2,000 pieces of content. So I threw it all on the list and I tried to organize in my head, which really helped into all the meetings. So he didn't do any of that. I had that, and so we went to the sitemap meeting and the content types meeting. I was like, oh, what about this? What about this? Oh yeah. So we started this list, and then, so I put this in over here, and I'm gonna try to swipe without having on this. So you can see we have the structure here. They have exhibits and different kind of features. And then here's the source URL, ooh, and then the node ID in case he wanted that, and then the page. We're gonna put the new URLs in here, which are gonna help with all our redirects. And then basically, I made this column and told him what I thought was bad or not bad. And then he went through and decided if I was right. And I tried to make notes about why I thought it was a good thing to do or not. So he's been taking stuff, and we made this deal that we're gonna take everything out and move it down to the bottom that starts to get purged. So I wanted him to see where everything came from before I decided to move it out, because he's the expert on all their content. So then he's just taken, okay, that's all purged and moves down. Now, if you were to see the wireframes for these pages, they're gonna look nothing like the site's actually 8 years old. It's really kind of crazy. So this is just him knowing the amount of pages he has to write. So these are not the actual, well, these probably are because they're exhibits, but we changed these names as we're moving forward, but what they should be called now, the new page titles, which is gonna help the person that does the new URL figure out what the new page title should be. So we're gonna change this as we go, and then we combine it. So some things are stacked under because it's gonna become one page, but here's where all the content is right now if you wanna use that to help you write the new page. So then there's a bunch of tabs on the bottom, so I just kind of grouped them in things, not necessarily navigation, so that he could better process all the different things he had to go through. It's kind of fun to just put things down there and say, you're not going to use this. You have to have a good relationship with your partner to be able to start saying some stuff is not good. So yeah, so that is an example.
What tool did you say you using?
What tool?
You said
So I use Google Google Docs for this. I have used Gather Content before. We actually ended up, because of the different media assets, we decided not to import from Drupal. So I would not have them write that many pages in there again. It was thousands without having a way to do it. But I think that was more of a first time trying it with our team. Some people being very hesitant about wanting to do the import kind of stuff. But I've heard a lot of good feedback. Didn't he say the internet was not good in this room? So that one, but it's a super user-friendly tool. The thing is, you've got to be really smart about how you put the content in because it creates a structure. So if you go back and you start changing things, it's kind of a pain in the backside. The one that I haven't tried that I love and I've heard, it's always at Confab, which is that Christina Halverson's conference, and so she uses them a lot. It's really weird to type. This is this tool. And so what it's doing is automatically generating your inventory. Where's an example? Essentially, I haven't done it, so I'm not sure how it pulls it. I don't know if they do, and you know, if it's not that much, I would pay for it. It's still spinning. No, it's not spinning. They had. Sorry, I know they had an example here somewhere, but. So something to also try out, especially if it's a lot. I mean, part of the thing is, sure, it automated, it's great. If it gets it in there, you're still going to need to take the time to put it within your navigation structure. Because part of it, when you actually go to every single page, that's when you get to take the notes. That's when you learn about the content. And so it might be helpful just to throw it in because, as you know, Christina's team does, is they live and breathe the content for months. You know, if you're getting in there and that's your chance to learn about it, sometimes it's better to copy and paste it in. But I've done other things where, you know, it's, on the site we're doing in Missouri right now is over 20,000 nodes. So I had a programmer for 2 hours pulling Google Analytics and all the nodes. And so I had a full list of it all compared together because there's no way I was going to pull all that out. Well, no example. Any other questions?
I always like to ask people, because I haven't found the perfect one yet, but when you're doing your editorial calendars, how you're, like, I've used like Excel in the past, you just literally build them in there, or if there's any tools.
That's what I do, but I've been a project manager for like 15 years, so that's kind of my
There's so many things out
my
there,
go-to.
I know, but I just haven't found that.
Yeah, no, like I think that's like one of the frustrating things when I've, you know, only started going into kind of strategy stuff, and you know, it's been only part of my job for the last couple of years. It's like, okay, well, how do you do this thing? And it's like, well, no, there's no template, there's no tool, there's no nothing. I've got to figure out what makes the most sense, which is part of the point. You're trying to think through what you're doing, but I've just seen lots of different examples.
I just have this like ideal tool in my head where everything will just be like, you just pull things all over the place, and it'll be, whereas like
Yeah.
Excel, it's like, copy paste cells.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah,
So what did you say you used?
just Excel. I mean, you know, or you could use something like Trello or something to like
Yeah, I thought about
alert you
that.
of new things, or free camp or something, but it's not really giving you the structure you need from a high level picture. But there's also a good book out that I haven't read fully yet, that just came out like a couple weeks ago, called Content Strategy Toolkit. And they have a lot of examples of different things in there, and that person's also from Brain Traffic. But I got it and just was scanning some things, but what's nice about it is it gives you examples of the different types of things. So you're like, okay, and I need to make a content workflow because that's really a really big issue in my company, so I want to put that down, and then you're just like, oh, this is how they did it. Okay, well, how should I do it for me? So.
How long do content projects take for your projects you work on typically?
So I would consider the Missouri project an outlier because it was hundreds and hundreds of hours, and our relationship for that was different. But I think I can get a good content inventory in place somewhere between 15 to 30 hours, like into the structure and reviewing things, and 30 would be like the thousands of content pieces versus like hundreds. So I think that's a good estimate in there somewhere. I think you can put page tables together in about 4 hours, depending on how many you want to do. And then,
What's the client aspect of that? Like how long does it, do you find it usually takes your client to fill out those content inventories with, like, we want to get rid of this page for your
Yeah, so-
organization, or write and fill out those fields?
Yeah, so what, with my experiences is that the first thing I try to do is alert them all these things coming down and try to like just block their time out, because it's going to take a bunch of time. And then essentially I let them know when it's going to be ready, and then be like, okay, in the first week, I want you to purge everything. So then it slides to about 2 weeks, because they have commitments to do and things like that. But depending on the amount, that can take them a lot of time. Also depends on if they have to do it as a committee versus one person. If we get the one person responsible, we can go through it a long time. But then while they're also doing it though, they can be writing page tables and writing content, because there's nothing about that document that stops them. So we try to highlight, pick one or two priority items to start writing right off the bat, and then we'll continue to work through that. So the guy that's literally on there right now, he has been going section by section based on priority, so he's not even done. But they're essentially trying to take the most important things, and he's actually doing an interesting thing where he's removing it from his current site, because they have it's a big organization, there's a lot of feelings about what's on the site and the different departments they have. So he's actually removing stuff on the live site, so people kind of get used to it being gone before he goes to the other site. So that's kind of taking him extra time, and then he might not get through it all. I mean, as long as we get through the main top pages, that's the better step than other. But I think it can take anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week for that main person that's working on the client side. I mean, it's a lot. I think it's kind of daunting, but. Anyone else?
Okay. So I'm actually writing and editing communications person. I'm trying to learn more about like what goes into making websites. But you were talking about web writing and like being talented in that area. We're mostly talking about kind of just like keeping it light and layering it and having links, or is there anything that stands out to you that you really
I think there's basic stuff that I think all of us can understand, of things like breaking things into chunks and using good headers. I think what I'm talking about finding someone is someone's ability to write well in a short time. I think, when you just even read people on Twitter, you're just like, wow, how do you even do that? It's something that like you can't necessarily teach. It's like an art kind of thing. So that's why I'm saying where the line draws from being able to do it internally to kind of stepping out and getting some outside help to really bring your brand forward. And sometimes it's more important than not. If you're a really fun, energetic brand, you're going to want to make sure more focus on that instead of something more, maybe education-wise, is more straightforward and plain text, because you can't get kind of fancy about it unless you're like in art school. That makes sense? If I didn't fully answer that, we can talk later too. Yep, it's on SlideShare, so let's see. So not going to work now. Yeah, I'll just tell it to you. I am Winter like the season, then LYNN on SlideShare, and it's up there right now. Oh, sorry. My SlideShare is Winter Lynn. Yeah. Oh, and I should probably say, because I'll get in trouble for my new job, we are always looking for really good people. I'm in charge of hiring project managers, front-end developers, and back-end developers, and we're always probably going to expand in the next 6 months or something. So if anyone knows of anyone that is interested in a job up in Bloomington, let me know. Cool. All right, thank you guys. Oh, shoot. Dang, the other room had the thing. Okay. Evaluation feedback. Love to hear it. I also have cards too, if anybody wants a card, and I would love to know if this was useful or not. This is actually my first time doing this Zach session, so it's always good to get feedback if things were helpful, if things were kind of not really useful. Cool, thank you guys.